have a seat, I will call group by group, because it's usually these things are done all together around the place where we are posting the post-its. But here it will be a nightmare, and we will not even listen to each other. And there are no microphone facilities there, so it will be just with my voice and the people who will, I will call group by group, okay? So I will call the speaker person of each group. I will call by the facilitator, so you point the speaker person, and then, yeah, we will see them there, okay?
But you will use the microphone, I will bring them. I think that's easier.
It's on.
So the first question was, how do you deal with the preservation of your data? So how do you preserve your data center, backups, etc.? And what reuse do you do?
Okay, here we have electronic invoicing seems quite important. We have the reuse of electronic invoices about the government, tax office, customer, internal audits. Standard can help the reuse of extraction of metadata. Mentioned are backups, disaster recovery, different data centers, specific legislation in Italy. And about other domains, not electronic invoice, we have here I need some help to read. Selection and appraisal routes. Okay.
It's a regional archive, so they have
Okay.
specifically
Okay.
explaining how they have to preserve the data and for how long.
Okay.
What data to preserve.
So this is simple for electronic invoices, but typically the rules are set by law. But for other documents, there is an additional effort to understand the.
Sophia, can you pick them up?
Yeah, when he's
Second
done.
group was from Madelina.
I'm here.
And your speaker was?
My speaker. I can speak. I was honestly very impressed by finding out that in the Czech Republic, they are very advanced in the digitizing procedures. Apparently, if I understood well, if not, please correct me. They have a full life cycle of archiving documents that is harmonized at both local and national level. They have procedures in place. They have legislation in place, and it seems that everything it's running perfectly, or at least in the desired way. What else? Would you have anything to add about this?
Okay, hello everybody. We have short comment. We have generally from 2004 law in the Czech Republic which absolutely specified all procedures from creation, receiving documents, formats, life cycle by the central government, municipalities and so on. And from 2012 is mandatory, must be all those documents electronic form. After we have defined formats for digital national archive for let's say century storage, we have defined formats for middle range, and we have all the controlling procedures. We are working with the SIP packages that all information system from municipalities and from government must collect the SIP packages, give to the National Archive. National Archive has verification tools and many other supported tools. And after we store this some open formats for forever, let's say, but not forever, but what we know on this technical moment. And this is really running. We have also control system that all national and local archive have authority to go to every of public or municipality company, and they can just come inside the office and say, hi guys, we are here for audit, and they can check if all those procedures are very well running and not. And now we are improving this, because now was accepted new law in the Czech Republic that all the government services, absolutely all 100% sure, in the next 5 years must be only in electronic form, like preferred.
Thank you. And then there was also an interesting contribution from a private company. Can you please remind me the name? Yeah. Okay. This, I mean, the role of the participant in this workshop is not really in the archiving, but in the stage before, that is in the record management, and they are dealing with managing data for a period of 75 years before filtering it and deciding if it has to be archived or not. So some of the, they are concerned also by the archiving, but it's more a stage prior to that. Then I have also other contributions, but I think these are the most important ones. I don't know if you want that I, yeah.
For the first question, so how do we preserve? So we have a digital preservation plan that describes the mission, the vision, the policy. So what do we have to preserve, how long, and so on. We spoke also about the selection of the data to preserve. So the agreements with the producers is very important, because in one person of our group, there are legal obstacles in her country, so they can give just guidance about the formats to deliver, but the law is not very precise enough, so it's difficult for them to get the right things. The need of metadata is also very important. All kinds of metadata, descriptive, technical, and preservation metadata. There is also a need for a workflow with all the steps, ingestions, but also all the controls needed at each step, and also the retention period of the documents before keeping them forever or throwing them away. And for the reuse, well, if we want to facilitate the access, the search interface has to be very accurately developed. Okay.
Sorry, I was thinking that we were a bit, because of the fact that we were coming from different backgrounds each, we were looking a little bit different at the question. So for us, when you were talking about how do you deal with the preservation of data, we're thinking of more that you deal differently depending on the type of data you are talking about. So, for example, we were saying that you have data who has a public purpose that you need to take into account that it needs to be preserved for a very long time. You have migrations, conversions that you need to take into account, and so on. Then you have what you would call commercial or banking or private data, more economic purpose data, if you could call it. Sometimes it's owned by the company, sometimes it needs to be preserved for a longer period of time, like an invoice for 10 years, that's up to 12, depending on the country. But it's still on fixed term, and it has a much more restricted purpose and restricted access. You have tax-related data. Those are more interested in by the tax authorities. I'm not sure if any or at all are made public ever. I don't think so, but probably certain access is given to the one which is directly involved in. I can access my information up to a point, my historic information. Then you have the citizens-related data, and here we put the work-related and also health-related data that you need to make sometimes available for up to 75 years in case of private pensions or even public pensions. All kinds of information, but the access is again restricted or controlled to who has access to that type of information. It needs to take into account the same kind of migration, conversion, and long-term preservation like the others.
All right, so about this question number one, so our team was a combination of producers, so created records, and one software producer and one archive, so we had a whole life cycle in this team, and we discussed about communicating legal requirements and how to facilitate organizations to fill those. So legal things are sometimes quite abstract, and so very practical advice is required. And for example, file formats and metadata, and that is one thing that we raised in the discussion. And of course, about using, one topic was really high in this reuse for legal purposes, and how to make sure that you can use those and trust how to use those, depending whatever content it is. And hard and digital copies and how to handle those simultaneously. So that was about the first one.
Thank you. David?
I am the speaker. So in the group, we discuss about different way of managing records. First, the digitalization of paper records, which is encouraged by many administration to have a total digitalized mass of records, and then also the use of ERMS to produce the records, and which was quite important to see for us. It was that it is not so easy to manage with the life cycle of the data between the midterm conservation archive and then after the permanent archives. So most of the times you've got different system, eArchiving system for the midterm archive and then for the permanent archive at the National Archives. So that was the point, the most point we saw, and we had also a point on the metadata profiles and the use of the metadata, which can have a deep impact on the preservation of the data.
Okay, so our group had a variety of participants, as probably you all did. They were using both proprietary systems and some open source technology. As you've seen with other groups, metadata was absolutely critical, metadata of all types. We got a variety of workflows that were determined by legal and regulatory frameworks. In terms of the data that was being used, we've got Born Digital, we've got examples of digitization and destruction of hard copies afterwards. We didn't have any examples of cloud storage in our particular group. In terms of the reuse, really it focused on access by the public, often through intermediary systems or use within, in this particular case, a financial organisation. And that's our contribution.
We also had where our group working on a variety of domains, but we had in common that we all were public administrations, going from municipalities to state agencies with a very specific function, to then representatives of state archives. So the kind of data we have were rather different, but all were in fact public data. So transparency came high on our in our discussions, reuse of the data, also being able to create digital workflows to get rid of these hybrid systems that working with part of it paper documents and then digital born records at the end. So and their preservation also had so very different aspects in our group. The state archives, for instance, they work with digital born records, but that is still something that is now getting started. So the most part of our collection still is paper records, and there we try, even Cyprus, Spain, or Belgium, we try to digitize mostly the records that are really asked for by the public, and those we are putting on our websites for free use by the public. Some of us are also digitizing on demand for university projects, for seminars, and so on. So on preservation side, we keep on servers, but also there is we try to share infrastructures. For instance, in Belgium, we have for the big federal scientific institutions a platform where all what has been digitized, the digital treasures of Belgium, are kept on in a safe environment, which is not accessible for the public, which is only for keeping purposes. And then for the rest, the aim to put as much as possible available for direct use by the public. And that's a bit of our first, apart from everything else what has been said already. That's for us.
Thank you. The question, how do you deal with the preservation of your data? My group answer is we deal well. Okay. How? We deal even very well. We follow the regulation, different regulations, and then we use Preservica solution or use EU platform solution. Very political answer. Okay. And at the question, what reuse do you do of it? We provide information to citizens, okay, and we realize historical research. Done. Thank you.
Okay, I will try to go fast because we are a bit late. So, what kind of data are you dealing with, and what do you do with those opportunities? So, XML was mentioned, of course, because our group is more is a bit electronic invoicing oriented. So, volumes are big. I think we should also mention that, of course, for example, in the government side, there are, of course, a lot of different kind of documents, like audio, paper, and so on, big files, and so these create big issues also. And about what do you do with, of course, there are companies that for which it's core business to deal with data. Service providers in general, for example, in the field of electronic invoicing, are important, especially for small and medium enterprises. And the lack of common legal framework is an issue in this case, because it's not possible to provide services on European, at European level. Is that okay? Okay.
We did not approach the second question, just the first and the third.
Thank you. So we record in our group administrative records, because one of our members is a national archive. The Publications Office keeps legal documents and general publications in all kinds of formats, because we have books, apps, posters, but also maps. So what do you do with that? But, well, we agreed that we just comply our mission, which is to preserve and to give access to the data.
The data we are dealing with, again, the structure that we've identified, you have the public data with the legislation, cultural heritage, research data, public authorization decision, public authorities decisions, web pages, tweets, and so on. You have then healthcare data with clinical data, DI-COM, well, all kinds of information about the patients. Some of them may be of clinical use, so it needs to be kept, then only for health record. Commercial data, then you have the electronic contracts, e-invoicing, banking transactions, and so on. You have also tax purpose data, and from another point of view, you have structured or unstructured data. With unstructured data, you can't do much. With the structured data, it may be some sort of anonymization, and then you can use it for statistical purposes if it can help. Then you have signed documents or not signed documents. They may be treated differently. You need also to keep in mind that if you have a signed document, you need to keep the proof that the signature was okay when it was put on the document. For opportunities, we've identified an opportunity for to create common standards for sector-specific data, like healthcare, space observation, research data. It may be useful if we have something at the European Union level that will make sense to share or to use for different purposes.
We discussed generally about this number 2, and of course when thinking about archives, we got a lot of different kinds of type of data, and nowadays quite a lot of more databases and structured information, and that's going to be the majority of our content. And we discussed about the possibilities for research using database as a structured content and not as a print out papers. And then it just gives us a much possibility as an archive for some of the research infrastructure provider. And of course, a variety of different file formats gives us a possibility, and also if there's a too big variety, there's a risk of losing the control of this. And of course, certain threats and dealing with these transactions and auditing what has happening and what has been doing and who has been using, and this is one dark side of everything. And of course the personal data, careful handling and tracking practices and how this is handled, it's one that we have to deal with very carefully.
Okay, so for us, we identified the biggest challenge. The biggest challenge first was the how to archive social network contents, and especially a technical way, but also legal constraints on saving social network content, and the way to present also original content in the original form. That's all.
We didn't address the second question in a really theoretical way, but rather we made a distinction between, given the kind of people we were, between historical records and then digital born records. And the historical records should be digitized in a maximal way to give public access, to share on websites, also to share on the Archives Portal Europe platform. To make it available in one tool for all the people interested in the European history. Then what concerning digital born records, we were talking about the advantage of having a unique digital repository for the whole of an administration, if preferably for the whole administration in a whole country, as is Spain is working on this. There are also in Norway and in Great Britain and so also attempts to do what they call archiving by design or records management by design, to implement already archival needs in a record management system, to have an easy transfer afterwards without many interaction needed. And then we also already addressed a bit of the third question, saying that in this archiving by design, records management by design, there should also be implemented the regulation, such as the GDPR regulation. And then we came by the problem that, in fact, archive services do have the theoretical knowledge, but don't have the people, the real people, the digital archivists who could go in the field to help administrations in implementing such archiving by design solutions. And that's then a bit, there is no good education available in many of the countries to train digital archivists. And then we came to the point that even archival trainings still have a really paper mindset, and in fact there should be a change of mindset to think of administration procedures straight away in a digital way instead of in a paper way. But that didn't.
What kind of data are you dealing with? So we deal with a large amount of digitized data, a large amount of record management system, a large amount of relation databases, and some exotic files, but not a large kind of file format, okay? And so we export them to citizen, to researcher, and to the EU portal. Thank you.
So, what are the potentials and the barriers for the archiving in your domain? So, about potentials, we see, for example, efficiency, interoperability, standards. Standards could be a potential and a barrier, because a lack of standard is a barrier and presence could be a potential. About barriers, the lack of regulations seems quite mentioned by everyone. In addition, a barrier could be in the migration, because the proof of data is important. The ownership of data is also important. Another issue could be with the EIDAS compliance that somehow was not mentioned in this building block and somehow has to be dealt with, because preservation of signatures is important in many domains. Anything more? Okay, that's all for us, for this group.
So I would just add what has not been said regarding the potential is the harmonization with all at EU level. Plus the fact that, for example, in the research agency on aviation, the stakeholders are much ahead on the digitization level. So there is a huge potential of going fast in this direction. On the barrier side, apparently there are some political barriers and lobby barriers, in the meaning that the companies, private companies especially, who are currently delivering services in this field, see now their jobs threatened, plus their economic activity. They will not be needed anymore. So they are trying to put some barriers and trying to block the implementation of not only archiving but also e-signature, also e-translation, of all the other building blocks that we are trying to promote. So there is maybe there a bigger need to promote the advantages at public level and at scale economy level of how to say, adopting the archiving services. Is there anything else on barriers? No, I think that's all. That was the most important aspect that I wanted to highlight.
No. This time is me. For the potentials, we defined here that the standards or the standardization will allow for less work or efforts, or could allow for less work and efforts. E-archiving as a whole, or trying to implement it, could allow us for having evidences and auditing, which could improve authenticity. And this standardization could also allow some kind of portability to be able to sustain or to change, accommodate changes in the long term. The barriers that the group defined were funding, first one. The another one was about staffing, the resource of staffing and the training and expertise of the staff to cope with this. Even when it is outsourced, it was talked that it is sometimes difficult to prepare a good tender specification to identify the needs of and of the institution and to communicate them, and both institutions and providers will need some kind of service providing standards where to make it easy to define which services should a system like a eArchiving system should have, and how to ask for it and how to obtain it. To have a common service description and some certification.
About the potentials, I know nobody mentioned, but in the private sector it is an essential element, cost reduction through digitization. This is something that maybe you don't feel it so much at the national level, but if you need to keep up to 3 or 4 huge warehouses full of papers, it costs you quite a lot as a company. So instead of that, you would prefer to have a server. So just to put it simple like that, it's cheaper in the end. In terms of barriers, we've identified the lack of political willingness as one of the main barriers. Is the possibility to dematerialize documents, which is not given in certain countries at all. It's a matter of providing the funding and the money and the legislation to switch to a digital archive. Also at national level, at public level. Then you have awareness of digital specific issues like degradation of data in time, migrations, emulation, conversion needs. Not many people are aware of it when they start this kind of projects. Different local regulation across EU for the same type of document. For example, invoicing, you will find that the retention time, if you could call it like that, varies from 5 years to 12 years depending on the country. And the funny thing is that I think Portugal, if I remember correctly, moved from 10 years to 12 years when it became digital. Apparently, it needs to take more time to make sure that the invoice is correct. So that's an idea for the future.
So we decided to see only potentials and not barriers because we wanted to see as a sunny side of everything at this side. And we thought that this kind of e-archiving is it's raising awareness to possible users and to, I would say, marketing and possible sites. Everything is sort of aware of the threats and possibilities and tools and requirements and everything. So it's much easier to have, I would say, content and practices and also clear concept is easier funding. And one thing is for certain support from this cooperation to how to coordinate actions in national level or organization level. So some kind of best practices collection for different organizations. So cooperation is one key element from our side also. And a little bit from technical side is try to avoid this vendor lock-in in also from service users, and there's a possibility to a larger variety of service providers and much more, I would say, cheaper prices and easier and better qualities also.
For the potential, we identify 2 points. First, it should be useful to compare national initiative to CEF e-archiving and keep the best practice from each. And then to develop skills, it should be very nice to have practical and operational trainings. And for the barrier, translation of the training are essential in the different language in Europe, and also budget issues. It's quite important to be able to organize a budget and even compare the cost of the paper and digital archives, the conservation.
In fact, we also saw for the biggest problems the lack of resources and the lack of staff, and staff not only in number but also in skills. There's also the need of real good skilled digital archivists again. But then we saw also potential in the ideas of sharing infrastructure, in trying to build unique digital repositories, and then also in more technical approaches like this record management by design, archiving by design, where all EU regulation could also be implemented right from the start. So that's all I have to add at this.
My group is expecting from the Commission to promote and support a real good, reliable, scalable, and open source e-archiving solution. Okay, we have a dream. But a system which is, doesn't need any skills, and the most important thing is today archivists are not computer scientists, so we need to make things easier for them. We need to train them to learn how to archive electronic content. So if the Commission cannot support an open source solution for everybody, I think the good thing could be to promote and finance some training to archivist people to learn them how to use computer things. Thank you. I've got a personal request. It's I would like to find people to define a scheme to exchange data between digital safe. How to move data from a personal digital safe to another personal digital safe, and to maintain the integrity and the content and the structure of all those different documents inside. Thank you.
So if there is anyone interested, please contact him. Thank you all a lot for this. So